These files were never meant to be opened. Hidden inside classified Soviet archives, sealed for decades. They don't tell heroic stories. They document what the system erased. This is a reconstruction based on restricted records and missing names. A father, 2 children, and a story the state tried to bury. Welcome to Forbidden Stories from Soviet.
September 1952. Midnight. An abandoned underground cellar on the outskirts of Simferopol. The atmosphere is oppressive, reeking of damp earth, rot, and a sickly clinical smell, ether. Lashed to a massive oak table is a man who, until yesterday, was an elite doctor smelling of red Moscow cologne. This is Boris, head of the medical wing at a prestigious camp. Now, has a trembling wreck. A thick gag chokes his screams. Standing over him is Yegor Popov. His eyes hold the cold eternity of a man who crawled through the trenches of Europe. A scout who knew how to kill without waking a bird. Yegor is terrifyingly composed. He holds a transfusion kit. "You love hygiene, don't you, doctor?" His voice rasps like shifting soil. "You told them it was for science, that the regime required sacrifices." Yegor sinks a thick needle into the man's vein. The dark blood surges, but it isn't going into a patient. It's dripping into a rusty bucket. Drip, drip, drip. The sound is deafening. May 1952. The Soviet Union stood at its zenith of might, yet it was also paralyzed by dread. Joseph Vissarionovich remained alive, though his age was showing. Within Kremlin halls, rumors of conspiracy spread. Newspapers began printing stories about killer doctors. Meanwhile, the Ministry of State Security, the omnipotent MGB, labored ceaselessly. Black sedans in the dark had become a common sight, as ubiquitous as the portraits of leaders on every wall. But in a tiny Ural settlement, a celebration erupted in the home of locksmith Yegor Popov. A genuine, boisterous event with joyful tears. Yegor, a widower and veteran, raised 2 kids alone. His wife had been spared the later horrors typhus took her in 46 within a week. Yegor had only them. 14-year-old Katia and 12-year-old Mishka. Katia was her mother's image. Blonde braids, blue eyes, a diligent helper. Mishka was a wild one with bruised knees, dreaming of flight like Chkalov. Then a miracle happened. At the plant where Yegor worked grueling double shifts, he was awarded 2 travel vouchers. Not to some local sanatorium, but to Crimea, to Artek, the ultimate dream for millions of Soviet youth. His communal neighbors envied him, yet they were gracious. They claimed Yegor Ilyich had paid his dues in blood on the front lines, so the regime was finally repaying the debt. Back then, it felt as though peace had truly settled. The conflict was behind them, the kids were off to the coast, and glory awaited. "Katia, look after your brother," Yegor advised while stuffing their meager things into a wooden trunk. "Mind your uniforms and press those red ties. You represent our city now." Katia just giggled. "Oh, Papa, it's the finest camp. They have mentors and strict rules." Had Yegor realized then what those rules entailed, or that he was personally boarding his children onto a train bound for the abyss, he would have shredded those passes. But he stood there smiling. A month vanished in an instant. Yegor renovated their room and bought new books, imagining their return, sun-kissed and smelling of sea air. They arrived in late June. No brass band played. The station was packed with families, but Yegor didn't recognize his own. 2 frail elders in children's bodies stepped off. Katia walked with a hunched back, as if carrying lead. Her thick braid had thinned, and Yegor froze. A stark streak of grey hair was visible on her temple. Mishka gripped her hand with a deathly squeeze, flinching at every steam whistle or loud laugh. Their skin wasn't tanned by the southern sun, it was a sickly, translucent grey with a jaundiced tint. "Katia! Misha!" Yegor screamed, rushing forward. They stopped. The boy winced as if expecting a blow. Katia looked up, but there was no warmth in her eyes. Only a hollow, icy, adult void. "Papa," she whispered hoarsely, "let's just go home." Home was a quiet hell. The kids stayed silent, but Misha shrieked at night. "Don't." "I won't tell." Yegor would find him trembling, soaked in sweat. Then he saw the marks, tiny dots on Katia's arms. Mosquitoes, Dad, shed lie, wearing long sleeves in the heat. A week later, Jaeger found the bathroom door ajar. Katia lay in water turned pink, his razor on a stool. She couldn't live with the memories. After the burial, Jaeger sat before Misha. I know they weren't bugs. Tell me, or I'll go mad. I swear, he'll find them all. Misha broke. He spoke of a special squad for elites. They were taken at night to a white mansion. Dr. Boris told them their blood was medicine for the state. But there were others, important men. A young one named Stos laughed while hurting Katia, calling her his toy. They threatened to kill Jaeger if the kid spoke. Jaeger's world turned to ash. He retrieved his hidden Luger and scout knife. The next morning met Jaeger with a grey drizzle. He wore his medals, the Red Star and Courage, hoping they'd be his shield. But at the precinct, Major Sidorov just spat on his story. Slander against the party. That's Article 58. I should toss you in a cell right now. Jaeger fled to the MGB, where a captain with dead eyes listened to his plea for the children. These are the fantasies of a broken boy, the official stated. Speak of this again, and we'll turn you and your son into camp dust. Accidents happen to orphans. Pop off. Jaeger stepped out into the rain, ripping the medals from his chest. He understood now. The militia, the doctors, the elites, they were one pack of wolves. He sent Misha to Siberia with a relative, sewing cash into the boy's coat. Survive, son, he said at the station. Then, Jaeger climbed into a freight car bound for Crimea. Law was dead. He pulled out a black notebook. 4 names. 4 targets. First, Ludmila, the recruiter. Crimea. October 1952. Gurzuf greeted Jaeger with the scent of pine and salt. He became a shadow in a loader's rags, watching. He found Ludmila, the recruiter. She lived like a queen on the blood of children, wearing French perfume while Katia rotted. One moonless night, Jaeger struck. He pinned her to the bed, a blade at her throat. Do you recall Katia? She wept, claiming she was just following orders from the MGB. She gave up the names, Dr. Boris in Yalta, Stos Gromov, and General Kovalev. Jaeger didn't end her life. He carved a Glasgow smile from ear to ear. Smile for the children now, he rasped, leaving a message in red lipstick. For Katia. Next was Yalta. He found the doctor's mansion. A heavy bronze bust of Hippocrates silenced the physician. Boris awoke tied to his own chair, needles in his arms. You loved science, doctor? Let's observe, Jaeger whispered as the dark fluid dripped into a bucket. The silver bucket for champagne was nearly full. Dr. Boris grew deathly pale as his own medicine slowly drained his vitality. With his final breaths, he wheezed out the names Jaeger sought. Stos Gromov, the sadistic son of a deputy minister, and General Kovalev, the mastermind of the entire blood-harvesting operation. Kovalev was an old butcher, terrified of aging. Jaeger waited until the doctor's pulse was a mere memory, then used a fountain pen dipped in the red fluid to scrawl across a portrait of the leader. For Misha. He vanished into the Yalta darkness, bound for the Foro sanctuary. The elite dacha was a paradise for those who lived above the law. Inside, Stos Gromov lounged in velvet, sipping fine wine and playing forbidden records. He fondly recalled the girl with the grey streak, how brittle she had been. He didn't notice the silhouette slipping past the marble fountains. Jaeger had arrived, a wraith of war seeking a debt that could only be paid in flesh. Jaeger bypassed the guard dogs like a shadow in the night. Inside the lavish dacha, Stos Gromov was pouring expensive wine when the record skipped. He looked up to see a figure resembling a walking corpse, blackened by coal and cold vengeance. Stos offered riches, pleading for his life. Do you remember Katia? Jaeger's voice was like grinding stone. The boy whimpered, calling the abuse a mere game. Jaeger lashed him to a heavy table. He didn't want the boy's life. He wanted to excise his pride and his lineage. Using a stolen scalpel, he performed a brutal, irreversible procedure. Star's shriek was swallowed by the blaring jazz music. Live, Jaeger spat, live as a cipher of a man. He left the elite air broken and began his final climb toward the highest villa, General Kovalev's castle. The old butcher sat in his study, clutching a mouser with trembling hands, surrounded by vials of stolen youth. But Jaeger shattered the French windows, a bleeding titan of glass and iron. The final battle erupted in a storm of broken glass and lead. General Kovalev, The architect of this blood-soaked farm fired his Mauser. A bullet tore through Jaeger's shoulder, but the scouts' rage was unstoppable. They fought like wounded beasts across the parquet. Jaeger eventually pinned the old butcher and lifted him, impaling the monster upon a sharp, forged iron candelabra. "Your pinnacle, General," he hissed. As the siren wailed below, Jaeger called the MGB. "The People's Court is finished." He jumped from the cliff into the churning abyss of the Black Sea. His body was never found. Years later, in the 70s, Mishka, now a pilot, met an old fisherman in Crimea. The man handed him a tarnished medal found in a cabin. "A soldier left this for his son," he said. Jaeger had vanished into the Siberian taiga, a ghost of justice. He had won twice. Once in war, and once for his daughter's soul. Sleep now, Katia. The legend of the father who broke a regime for love will never die.